If you haven't heard, we quietly launched our router test bench almost a year ago, and we've been working hard ever since to make improvements to the way we test routers. One question that repeatedly pops up online is, what's the best gaming router? In the process of figuring out how to test router latency and answer such questions, we set out to confirm what a lot of you may already know. There is no such thing as a gaming router. It's not quite that there's snake oil per se, but splurging on a gaming router won't actually improve your network latency any more than a non-gaming router would. Today, we're going to dive into why that is and how we came to that conclusion through objective testing. Let's get the obvious out of the way first. Using a hardline connection with an Ethernet cable will always give you a better gaming experience than using Wi-Fi. It doesn't matter if you're using the most expensive router on the market or the cheap one you've had for 10 years. There's no replacement for an Ethernet cable. If you're serious about online gaming, that's always going to be your best bet. Wi-Fi just wasn't designed for low latency communication. Only one device can transmit data at a time on Wi-Fi. On a typical network, your gaming PC has to compete not only with other devices and apps, but also with other background chatter and management tasks. All of this interferes with your device's ability to send data packets, leading to lag spikes. With a wired connection, however, packets can move more quickly and more freely without interference. To show this, we put 11 routers to the test, comparing their latency when wired to their latency when connected wirelessly, in both near and far configurations. Unsurprisingly, the wired connection wins every time, with virtually no latency or jitter. The only exception we found so far is the Linksys E5400. The latency you see here only occurs when there are two devices present on the network, with the second device overloading the router's hardware by downloading a file at maximum speed. Since the E5400 only has ports rated at 100 megabits per second, it's very likely that its CPU was overloaded. Even so, the wired latency is still better than wireless. And it goes without saying, but generally, the closer you are to the router, the less latency you'll have. So, if you must use Wi-Fi for gaming, keep that in mind. We also tested the differences between using a 2.4 GHz band and a 5 GHz band. For this test, we use a controlled network with just our client and server. We then sent a basic ping every second for 24 hours on both bands to compare their round-trip ping time. The results speak for themselves. You have a lot less interference from neighboring networks on a 5 GHz band, reducing the number of lost packets and network collisions. So, despite having a shorter range, you're better off gaming on 5 GHz. For those reasons, we conducted all of our tests on a 5 GHz band. Now, with that out of the way, is there really a difference in network latency between everyday routers and so-called gaming routers? The short answer is no. The long answer is that router hardware is hardly ever the bottleneck that results in network latency. The main reason you experience latency on a network is buffer bloat. Put simply, all the devices on your network are sending thousands of packets to your router at any given time. And it's the router's job to forward those packets where they need to go, regardless if it's via Wi-Fi or an Ethernet connection. As long as the router can send out the packets faster than they come in, you're golden. But if the queue fills up, the router will drop incoming packets, creating lag spikes and other issues. If there are limitations on your network, the router's queue can get filled up when the network is congested with too many devices, creating a bottleneck. In most cases, that bottleneck is caused by the bandwidth limitations of your ISP plan. This can lead to your network getting overloaded with data, whether it's torrent downloads, picture backups, or the latest Windows update downloading in the background. To show this, we put our router through another test. Using Counter-Strike 2, we compared performance when the network is empty to when the network is overloaded by a second device downloading on a different server at max speed. We applied a bandwidth limitation of 50 megabits per second to simulate a typical internet plan and make sure it was the WAN port that caused the bottleneck on the network. The result shows pretty definitely that the router itself is not the issue here. With an empty network, every router we tested had similar latency when looking at raw performance. As long as there's no bottleneck, even low-end routers will do their job, while even the highest-end routers can't overcome a congested network. Now, we did say raw performance. This is straight out of the box, no extra features enabled. But surely there's a way for routers to manage the queue and prioritize certain packets over others. You'd think something billed as a gaming router would especially be able to prioritize packets coming from a game over other applications, right? Well, yes, but every router we tested offers some sort of queue management feature, not just the ones marketed as gaming routers. These traffic shaping technologies have been around for a while, though their implementation has continued to improve over the years. They usually fall under the banner of quality of service or smart queue management, QoS or SQM for short, but the exact naming can vary. The scope of these features also varies, but depending on the implementation, QoS or SQM features can do everything from basic device bandwidth limitations to prioritizing specific applications on specific devices, like Call of Duty on your Xbox, for example. To see what kind of impact these features have, we redid our previous test comparing latency on an empty network versus a congested network, but this time with QoS or SQM enabled. For 9 out of 11 routers, QoS improved latency issues significantly. With a congested network, you can see a lot of rubber banding as a result of lag spikes. But when QoS is enabled, you still get the occasional lag, but it's a lot less noticeable. By ensuring that a full-speed download on one device didn't overload the router, QoS left enough bandwidth for the other device to game with reduced latency. You may have noticed that one of the outliers is the Linksys E5400 we mentioned before. The reason is that, as we saw in our wired versus wireless test, its CPU was likely overloaded, rendering QoS ineffective. The other outlier is the Eero Max 7, which simply showed no improvements despite toggling its QoS feature on. So, traffic shaping settings do what they're supposed to do, and they're found on most routers, regardless of whether it's a gaming router or not. However, the implementation of these features varies drastically. For some, it's as simple as toggling it on a menu and choosing a device, application, or type of traffic to prioritize. Others need to be configured manually and are much more arduous to set up. And sometimes these features get dressed up in marketing speak. The Game Boost feature on the Asus ROG Rapture GT-BE98 Pro? It's actually a QoS algorithm hiding in a gamed-up trench coat to make consumers think they're getting something exclusive to a gaming router. It's worth noting that we didn't fine-tune any of the QoS settings to get optimal performance, so we can't say which implementations work better than others. We were mostly interested in the broader trend. Does the feature work, and can it help with gaming latency when the network is overloaded? While QoS features pretty definitely can help, you're better off addressing the problem at the source. If you're lacking the bandwidth to do everything you want to do on your network without latency, it might be worth giving your ISP a call and upgrading your internet plan, especially now that bandwidth is nowhere near as limited a resource as it used to be. Bottom line, don't overload your network. And if you find that you're frequently filling up the bucket with things like torrents, file backups, and other downloads, then it's time for a bigger bucket. Gaming is a two-way communication stream, so upload speed is also important. That's something to keep in mind since a lot of ISPs have low upload speeds even on plans with higher download speeds. So what does this all mean if you're looking to buy a new router and you're considering a gaming router? First, gaming over any Wi-Fi connection is not the best idea if you want to avoid latency. There's no substitute for a wired connection. If, for whatever reason, you can't avoid gaming over Wi-Fi, try to stay near your router and use a 5 or 6 GHz band. Most importantly, good networking hygiene will do more for you than buying a specialized gaming router. If your network is overloaded, there's no router under the sun that'll help you. If, on the other hand, your network's bandwidth isn't limited by your ISP or being hogged by torrents and other devices, then latency performance will be roughly the same using any modern router, whether it has breathing lights or not. Until next time, I'm Marco from RTINGS.com, where we help you find the best products for your needs. We applied a bandwidth limitation of 50 megabits per second to simulate a typical internet plan and make sure that the WAN port that caused the bottleneck on to make sure it was the WAN port. WAN.